I bought the house for quiet, but the day I posted a single picture of the balcony, the blue sky, the mountains behind it, my phone buzzed non-stop. The third message stopped me cold. Perfect, my mother wrote. Evan and Lila can move in by Friday. Subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're from. My name is Mara Dawson, 30 years old, brand consultant in Seattle, living mostly out of PowerPoint decks and caffeine. For 10 years, I'd rented apartments that felt like waiting rooms. White walls, silent neighbors, the hum of other people's ambition leaking through thin drywall. I wanted space. I wanted air that didn't come through someone else's vent. So when I found the black timbered house on Lake Arrow Point, I signed faster than reason allowed. I didn't tell my parents. Not because it was a secret, because I knew what they'd say. My brother Evan would need it more. My money should be invested better. A single woman in the woods was impractical. They'd call it concern, but what they really meant was control. Growing up in Maple Crest, control was a family tradition. Our home was perfect on the outside. White porch swing, blue shutters, smiling Christmas cards. Inside, it was a stage built for my brother. Every wall sang his name. Trophies lined the hallway. His graduation photo hung over the fireplace, larger than life. My own achievements lived in drawers and boxes, out of sight, dust-coated proof that I existed. I used to think they simply forgot. But forgetting takes effort when it's every single year. One Christmas I came home from college to an empty house. They'd told me flights were too expensive, that they were spending the holiday with Aunt Claire in Florida. A week later, I saw the family photo online. Everyone by the tree, red sweaters, our living room. No Florida, just me erased. I learned to stop waiting for invitations. I worked, saved, built a life where I didn't need anyone's permission. Every late night, an extra project bought me distance. And last winter, distance bought me peace. When I walked into the new house, the air was colder than snow. It smelled like cedar and dust, like beginnings. I lit a fire, sat on the floor, and felt something I hadn't in years. Safety. No footsteps, no interruptions, no judgment. Just me and the crackle of wood. I thought the silence would last. It didn't. A week later, I posted that balcony picture, and 10 minutes after, Mom claimed my house. At first, I laughed. Then I saw the second message. We'll bring the crib and boxes Friday. Lila's due soon. She needs stability. The words didn't even ask. They announced. Evan had always been the golden child. Of course, stability meant taking what I built. I typed 3 letters back. Number. Dad called instantly. His voice was calm the way winter water is calm, seconds before it freezes solid. Mara, don't be unreasonable. Your brother's lease ends this week. That house has 3 bedrooms. I bought it for me. You can share. Family supports, family. No, I said again. Not this time. He sighed. You always were difficult. He hung up. That night, I poured wine and watched the lake swallow the last of the sun. The glass in my hand trembled. Not from fear, but fury. For 30 years, I'd bent quietly. Maybe it was time to stay still and let them hit the wall. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Family chat. Mom added Evan, Dad added Lila. Then came the flood. Your brother's packing. We'll handle the utilities. Make room for the baby. They spoke like it was already decided. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was invasion. I called my grandmother. If anyone could understand, it was her. She answered on the second ring. Sweetheart, breathe. Tell me. When I finished, she went silent for a full 10 seconds. Then, they see what you built, and it scares them. They only know how to claim, not to create. Don't let them through that door. Her voice cracked, old but steady. And if they show up, you call the sheriff. Blood doesn't erase boundaries I promised her I would. That evening, I drove into town, bought cameras and motion lights. By midnight, the house glowed like quiet armor. I sat by the fire and whispered to myself, this place is mine. The first alarm went off 3 nights later. Headlights crawled across the pines. 2 cars. I checked the feed. Evan, my parents, and Lila, laughing as they climbed out. My mother carried a wreath. My father held a box labeled nursery. They rang the bell, knocked, shouted, then pounded. My hands shook, but I didn't move. I opened the phone, dialed the number I'd memorized from Grandma's call. County Sheriff's Office. This is Mara Dawson at 14 Lakeside Ridge. There are trespassers attempting entry within minutes. Red and blue washed through the trees. The sirens carved through the night like a verdict. The sheriff stepped out, polite but firm. He asked me one question. Do you know them? Yes, I said. But they don't live here. He nodded once, turned to my father. Sir, this property's private. You'll need to leave. My mother gasped like it was unthinkable. We're her family. The sheriff didn't blink. That doesn't make it your home. They left. Slowly. Evan looked over his shoulder and said, You'll regret this. But the only thing I regretted was waiting this long to draw a line. When the lights disappeared down the road, I sank to the floor and stared at the fire until dawn. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The silence felt holy. The next morning, a text came from Grandma. Proud of you. Paper beats guilt. Always. I laughed through my breath. She was right. Still, part of me waited. For the retaliation, the letter, the guilt storm. It came 2 days later, handwritten in perfect loops. Mara, you've humiliated us. You've embarrassed this family. We raised you better than to call the police on your own blood. Think carefully before you destroy what's left. I folded the page, fed it to the fire, and watched it turn to nothing. Days passed, then weeks. The cameras stayed quiet. The lake thawed. The air softened, and for the first time since childhood, I slept through the night. But peace is a fragile thing. It doesn't stay silent forever. Spring came slow over Lake Arrow Point. The snow melted into glassy water, and the trees dripped like the world was exhaling. I spent my mornings on the balcony with coffee and silence that felt earned. Until one morning, my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach turn. Grandma. Her voice was smaller than usual. Mara, your father's in the hospital. For a moment, all I heard was static and the sound of my own pulse. She told me he'd had a heart episode, that he was stable, that my mother was with him. And then she whispered, I know what you're thinking. Go if you need to, but don't go to be scolded. I drove down anyway. The highway blurred, wet from melting ice, and the whole drive I kept asking myself one question. Will they blame me for his heart too? At the hospital, the smell of antiseptic hit like memory. I walked past white walls that felt like every Christmas I was left out of. Mom sat outside the ICU, her posture perfect, hands folded like a woman auditioning for sainthood. She looked up. You came. Her tone wasn't relief. It was accusation. Yes, I said quietly. Good, she replied. Maybe you can explain to him that you didn't mean to cause this much stress. I didn't answer. I walked past her and into the room. Dad lay there, pale and thin, machines clicking quietly around him. When his eyes opened, they went straight to mine. You finally came, he rasped. I heard you were sick. He tried to sit up. Your mother hasn't slept in days. This tension you've created? Stop, I said softly. You can't blame me for your choices. His eyes narrowed. You called the police on your own parents. I stood still. I called the police on trespassers. He looked at me like I'd spoken another language. And maybe I had. One where my life belonged to me. I stayed less than 5 minutes. When I left the room, Mom stood up fast, blocking my path. Apologize, Mara. End this. Family matters more than pride. No, I said. Family should matter more than control. She didn't move. Her lips trembled like she wanted to scream, but all she said was, You've changed. Yes, I whispered. Finally. Outside, I sat in my car until the windows fogged. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt. Only exhaustion and freedom. That night, I called Grandma again. I couldn't stay, I said. You weren't supposed to, she replied. They built this cycle. You just stopped spinning. Her voice steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. Don't go back there. Heal where you're planted, I promised her I would. Months passed. The house became more than walls. It became proof. I painted, rebuilt, replaced. I made mistakes and fixed them myself. Every nail and brushstroke whispered one truth. I did this. One afternoon, while sorting old files, I found a sealed envelope. The paper had yellowed with time. Postmark. 15 years ago. Sender. Grandma. Inside was a card and a check. $5,000. The note read, Mara, one day you'll need to leave before they convince you that you can't. Start here. I pressed it to my chest. She'd known all along. I called her that night. Why didn't you tell me? She laughed softly. Would you have taken it back then? I smiled through tears. Probably not. Exactly. You had to earn your wings before you could use them. By summer, the air was warm again, and the house felt alive. I started renting it out occasionally. Writers, photographers, travelers who wanted quiet. Every guest left glowing reviews. One wrote, "This place feels like peace rebuilt itself." I liked that line. Peace rebuilt itself. Then one morning, my inbox pinged with a familiar name. Evan. The message was short. "Hey, things went bad with Lila. I'm between places. Can I stay at the lake house for a bit? Just until I get sorted. I'll pay rent if you want." I read it twice. Then I typed one line. Number. "You can't." His reply came fast. "Even now? After everything that's happened?" I didn't answer. Some stories don't need sequels. That night, I sat by the fire with a glass of wine, watching the flames blur into gold. I thought about all the noise my family used to make. The lectures, the guilt, the endless, exhausting expectations. And then I realized something. Silence wasn't the absence of love. It was the proof that love doesn't have to hurt. Weeks later, I drove to Grandma's cottage. She was in her garden, sun hat tilted, humming to the bees. When she saw me, she smiled. "Well, if it isn't the woman who built her own mountain." I laughed. "You mean my fortress." She poured lemonade into glass jars, the ice clinking soft as bells. "So?" she asked. "Are you keeping it forever?" "Forever," I said. "Good," she smiled. "Some people inherit peace. Others have to fight for it." I reached over, squeezed her hand. "I fought. And I won." "You did," she whispered. "And you did it beautifully." That evening, I drove back to the lake. The sun sank low behind the ridge, setting the windows of my house on fire. For a moment, it looked like the whole place was glowing from the inside out. I stood on the deck, felt the cool air move across my skin, and closed my eyes. I thought about that little girl waiting in the kitchen years ago, watching her mother pour pancake batter into the shape of her brother's name while her own toast went cold. She'd been forgotten then, but she'd grown into someone unforgettable. I whispered into the wind, "This is my home, my peace, my story." Then I turned to the camera light on the railing, still glowing red from where it recorded everything that night they tried to break in. I looked right at it and said, "If you've ever had to close the door to protect your peace, you'll understand me." The firelight flickered on my face, soft but steady. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a daughter or a disappointment. I felt whole. I felt free. If this story made you feel something, subscribe.